An eternal void of nothingness was what surrounded them for countless millennia. Thousands of the Kartakani peoples have been asleep in their Ethereum-powered caskets for so long, the loss of their homeworld now seems little more than a broken memory. The infinite void of space, seemingly supplying them with a near-infinite gift of the great Ethereum they use to power their great ships. Many a year ago, a doom came to their world, a great, terrible doom. Mages, sages, and great masters of rock and metal came together to create a solution. It took all they had, and launched into the sky a great metal fleet powered by Ethereum, instead of the great sails that powered their ships of old. A fleet of 100 great ships set sail into the skies a month before the world of Karatha was lost, a great and powerful detonation rendering it to a broken husk. Each vessel expertly crafted and customized to an absurd degree, each one powered by great engines that could siphon the very Ethereum out of the universe itself, convert it into fuel, and blast with a force to catapult them into the beyond. Each ship surrounded by a bubble, a great barrier to protect them from the horrors of the void. At the head of this fleet proudly sat the Retribution's gaze. Since that terrible day, the fleet stays silent, sailing in the void. Ghosts and bound spirits, unrestful for eternity, bound to keep the vessels functioning and away from danger. The fleet could hold in comfort and security 100,000 of their people, as undignified as it was to be stacked on top of each other like boxes at a market. It was still safety. As saddened as they were to leave behind millions of souls, this small contingent was all they could muster in the short time they had. Every 4 years they would be awoken from their caskets to celebrate the Great Conjunction, a time of happiness and peace where they would feast and forge new alliances. The celebration was used to fill their bellies and secure their souls from the other's eternal grasp through rituals and spells. Then when the party was over and the mess cleaned, they would return to their caskets and sleep once more. Each celebration would feed their bodies with the food supply conjured by the mages, cooked by the chefs, then eaten by all present, young or old, peasant or king. It would last barely a week. Each casket would act as a chamber where the occupant would be kept in a state of time sleep. The body would still progress and age, losing fat and tissue, but at such a staggeringly low rate, the effect would be negligible in comparison to actual time. Each man or woman would enter fat and happy, and exit 4 years after, empty-bellied but healthy. The mages would use the great Ethereum crystals and tuning libraries to gather together a grand feast, conjuring food from oblivion and feeding them all with it. The food was basic and simple, but it was greatly appreciated by all present. The vast amount of Ethereum gathered by the crystals in their close proximity to the void ensured they could happily sail in the void for many more millions of years if they so needed to. Then one day a great boon arrived, a gift from the gods. The Retribution found an object. It was a door, a massive door. The flight crews were awoken from their caskets, engineers readied to their stations and mustered to arm the few cannons they had. The massive door was bigger than the Retribution by 3 times and could comfortably fit inside it. The object in which the door was lodged was truly massive, stretching from horizon to horizon, distinct bumps breaking the otherwise flat, gray metal landscape. A mage stood atop a pedestal at the front of the Retribution. The shield around them rippled with activity as he cast a spell, a short incantation. The spell failed. The door held fast, a symbol of keep clear, refusing them entry. The bright orange strips surrounding and crisscrossing the door shimmered as if to mock him. The mage would dare not bring defeat to his people and struck out in anger. A bolt of lightning from the skies of the motherworld itself flashed from his mighty staff and hit a small object to its left. Lights. Bright red lights appeared at each of the four corners of the door, spinning around and around as if to warn. Then the lights turned green and ceased their rotation. The doors yielded and opened. Quickly, as fast as they could, their great engines spooled up, belching fire behind them as the great fleet charged forth into the new opening. They had finally reached it, the great land they were promised so very long ago. Each ship going through what appeared to be a thin sheet of pure blue light that appeared in the hole. They knew not why. All they knew was that their great journey was over. As the last ship slid through, the door closed behind them. They were now trapped. The mages were beside themselves with sadness and worry. All light had vanished, all was naught but pitch-black darkness, and they were dismayed they had led their people into a trap. A great devourer, the one who brings darkness and death, had lured them into a trap. It was then. The lights came on. The sight was the most beautiful sight they had ever witnessed. They were inside a massive world, many times larger than they could have imagined, and what lay before them was a forest of giant trees and giant hills, mountains of material they could use. They were clearly in a confined space, a great box, a great giant box, hundreds of kuliks high, millions of kuliks in area that could comfortably house their entire peoples for 1,000,000 generations to come. 3 great rivers ran through hundreds of kulits wide, with thousands of trees of all conceivable kinds, stretching from green grass to steel ceiling. This was nothing short of paradise. Each ship, as it came accustomed to the light, the great bubble shield popped and allowed each occupant to smell clean, fresh, beautiful air for the first time in as many years as anyone could remember. The fleet forged ahead to the nearest tree, a massive tree of red bark, thick enough to house 10 entire cities for them. They would be more than comfortable here. This was the absolute essence of everything they could ask for. Of 100 ships, only 16 were kept functional, returned to their glory as warships to defend their new home. One was permanently anchored to serve as a monument to their great triumph. The rest were scrapped down to supply their new industry as they quickly carved through the great tree and forged a new empire. A new home was made in a large dirt pile at the tree's base and used to mine valuable minerals. The lake was flush with massive, enormous creatures that resembled fish. Each one could feed 1,000 of them, and in that great lake were tens of thousands of fish, some bigger and juicier. The local wildlife proved a challenge, but nothing that could not be tamed or reasoned with, and the giant birds and land creatures that populated this great place became mounts for work, flyers for security, travel, and beasts of burden. Soon these flying beasts became mounts for explorers and sky dancers, and the land beasts, known as mounts, for warriors. Lesser or smaller beasts became farming helpers and beasts of burden that carried trade goods across vast distances. After 6 months of living, the population doubled, and a monument was commissioned by the magistrate court to commemorate the great journey. With a surplus in resources due to their location and a new burgeoning empire, nobody saw reason to judge, and so work began in earnest. A great site was determined, a place called a junction box, and a monument was quickly built of stone and wood in front of this great place. Now known as the Junction, the mages and casters quickly began to use it as their headquarters. Quickly a new guild was formed, and from this junction, an Ethereum siphon was constructed. The great pink crystal was 10 times the size of any other they had ever built. The mages' power grew, and soon they were able to manipulate the soil, and the crops grew faster and produced more food, fields never growing fallow. They had truly found paradise. War, famine, disease, hardship, anything their new home threw at them. For 14 years, this, regardless of the dangers, was paradise. A war had come and gone between House Astariel and House Arnoris, with thousands dead before it could be found out that conspirators had gone mad and were bent on everyone's destruction. Assassins in the night slaughtered them and revealed their plans to all, stopping both wars. A great plague ravaged the countryside one day, causing the animal population to face horrible injury and an agonizing death. The great plague jumped to their owners, and before they knew what was happening, farmhands and stable boys started getting sick too with the same awful disease. Quick as it came, though, it vanished, with limited side effects, but many deaths. A drought hit them. On day there was a massive shuddering of the earth, and the world around them went dark for several days. In the coming months, the rains never came, and the situation became desperate. In response, the gods themselves seemed to understand their plight, and to stay the hunger and sadness, a gigantic pile of fresh foods, including exotic fruits and beautiful sweet stuffs, was found outside one of the villages. A new pond seemed to have been dug and filled with pristine, clean water. Then one day, after 14 years of life in a new world, with minor incidents but no real problems, he came to them. On a fine, crisp morning on the 14th year, a device, a spyglass of sorts, was found outside the Alaris Kingdom's castle. Out of curiosity, a youngster looked into it. He shrieked in terror at the sight of a giant creature. The sheer size was nothing short of terrifying. The youngster immediately raised the alarm, and armies were assembled in preparation. The giant suddenly began to walk towards them. It took barely a few minutes to cross vast lands, hundreds of clinks across, but strangely, as some mages noted, took great care not to step on anything. Just before reaching the front line, it stopped and sat down in a field. It was just like them, only with rounded ears and of massive size. Armies were readied to fire. One mage used a sound resonance spell and commanded the creature to identify itself. It responded by simply smiling and began to construct something. A strange parallels line of steel railings placed upon wood boards, carefully clicking them into place and setting them gently on the ground, then placing upon them an object. It was a box, a big rectangular box with tiny wheels underneath it. He pushed a series of buttons, and the box began to move along the track. It moved with exceptional grace and speed, crossing the entirety of the track he had built in mere seconds. He had noticed their fascination as the armies had now come to rest and were watching the spectacle around them. He stopped the thing on the tracks and was simply sitting there, smiling. Finally, he spoke, his voice loud and booming, heard by all across the kingdom. "Good morning. My name is Carter Tyson. I am an ambassador to the Terran Republic. Welcome aboard the TRS Oregon," he said, and simply sat there with a smile. After what seemed an age, one apprentice mage stepped forward from the battle lines and approached, using an amplification spell to guarantee his words could be heard. "What be thy purpose here, O great being? And what, pray tell, be this box that runs along tracks?" "Well, I am an ambassador. It's my job to negotiate terms of peace. This box is what we humans call a train. We use them for mass transit and cargo freight. We figured you might accept a small gift as our way of saying hello." It replied, taking a small book out of its pocket and placing it gently on the ground. "Did you create this place? Did your great constructs grow this forest?" An older, more experienced mage spoke out. "I didn't build it with my own hands, but it is owned by the people I work for. You have set up your home in one of our starships. It's an arboretum. It's essentially used for transporting small ecosystems across the void of space so we can plant trees on other planets." He replied, and hauled out a large book that had pictures in it, using these pictures as a visual guide. "What is thy business here, O great being? Have you come to harm us?" One soldier shouted among his fellows, Why would I do that? After all." He reached into another pocket and produced a bar of the sweet, sweet chocolate that all the people so deeply loved and placed it on the ground. "We've been helping you out all this time. Why would we want to harm?" They looked up at him with shock and surprise. 20 men on the front broke rank suddenly and charged with careless abandon across the field, each screaming, "Chocolate!" as crazed madmen, and began to pounce on the giant block of treat and carved at it with their swords. The army's great discipline crashed into nothingness as they charged forth and assaulted the chocolate bar. The giant held a hand on the ground, and one brave soul stepped forward and climbed onto it. The giant brought the mage up to eye level and smiled. "Well, it seems we've won you over. Shall we discuss an alliance, then?" The mage bowed in respect. "We shall be deeply honored, O Great One. Please, just call me Carson." He used his other hand, opening it for a handshake. Heavy footsteps thumped through the halls, the pristine and sterile, white and gray corridors marked with various doors and signage pointing in various directions. A man, 6'1", gray-haired and grizzled, trotted calmly through the hallway with a brisk pace. He had his hands behind his back, clenching his fists out of mild annoyance, as if he perceived he had more important things to do. He stood at the entrance to a hangar bay. The label above the door told him he was in the right place. Arboretum, 3 of 27, authorized entry, only contents, fresh water, deciduous forest. I hope for his sake this was important. If this is a waste of time, you damn bet I'ma steal all the tequila from the bar. He muttered to himself, then pressed a button to be let in. He was greeted by the sight of a group of 7 people, 4 youngsters, 2 adults, and one white-haired, long-bearded old man with a name tag Jeremy on his left shoulder. He spoke. "Ambassador Tyler, good to see you again. This better be good old man. I'm in deep hell with the Mars reclamation movement. We got shit to do, Jeremy. Make it quick." "Oh, it is. It very much is. But first, have you ever watched the movie, The Borrowers, before?" Jeremy asked with a strange smile on his face. "Really? Actually, yeah, I did, when I was like 5 years old, I think. Watched that movie for a kindergarten class project once. What does that have to do with this?" Tyler stroked his beard in thought. Jeremy chuckled, somewhat sadistically. "Play the recording I made, please." The monitor on the control room lit up and began to play a security recording, a compilation of 14 years of work. It showed a fleet of 118th-century sailing ships lining up at one of the cargo access doors. Each one was no bigger than a New York City bus. The lead ship shot out some kind of electrical attack and opened the cargo bay door. After cycling atmosphere, the cargo bay door opened, and deposited them into one of 12 arboretums. The ships moved around to a close redwood tree and started setting up shop, and what followed on the screen was about 14 years of development in the form of a montage. They tamed the various woodland animals in the arboretum as pets, service animals and other things, using sparrows and hummingbirds as flying mounts. They built a massive crystal lattice structure in front of a junction box and seemed to use it as a place of worship. Then came a screen full of arboretum explanations and system readouts, detailing how the entire light fixture system had to be replaced in order to supply a day/night cycle. The entire water table had to be sterilized and properly filtered. The koi ponds had to be slowly replaced with more easily replaced trout, and the entire fire suppression system had to be overhauled so as to not go off from residual smoke from the settlements. Cameras zoomed in on citizens living their lives, the minuscule race of humanoids, barely 3 inches tall, but biologically exactly like humans, only with pointy ears. Images flashed across the screen of them, carving an entire city out of the trunk of a 200-meter-high redwood tree. Smaller buildings made out of wood and carved out of stone mined from various boulders made up the majority of a large city housing thousands of people. A simple life of medieval peasants in a world of magic. Ambassador Tyson was stunned silent. Seriously? It's 3183 AD, and in over 1,000 years of empty nothing, our first contact are tiny magical space elves. Jeremy simply shrugged, with a smile. Better than being alone, at least. We managed to recover one of their ships after it somehow lost power and crashed into the lake. It's in the lab so we can try figure out how their tech works. Have you done any contact ops yet? Tyson asked, taking a look around. No. We have left various trinkets, such as watches or nuggets or iron ore, lying around in inconspicuous places. We've mostly been spending our time reinforcing the hull and upgrading the life support system so we can keep them in here. We've just run out of funding. Jeremy tiredly sat back on his seat and leaned on the armrest. Any serious incidents? One war? We stopped them before they wiped each other out by using a remote-controlled drone to kill agitators and conspirators. One plague of flu that hit the squirrel population and jumped species after one of our interns dropped his water bottle into the filtration system. One serious incident was a drought and famine that came after a meteorite strike and hit the climate control system hard, making us shut it down for 8 months. Had to go in with watering cans to keep the grass from dying and dig a new pond to keep it filled with water. Jeremy calmly explained, showing footage from various operatives during this time. Have you conducted any experiments on them? Nothing intrusive. Placing trinkets, such as watches, giving them a few carrot seeds and seeing that they do with it. Leaving a slab of chocolate out and seeing what happens. As it turns out, they are chalk addicts. They can't get enough of the stuff. Beyond small stuff, we simply haven't had time or opportunity, just because we have been keeping the facility running. Jeremy guided his attention to a shelf nearby, filled with various objects, including an electric train model, scaled to fit the tiny elves. All were labeled, "To be used later." The ambassador sat thoughtfully for a moment. Are we good for first contact? That's why you are here. Jeremy replied, All right. Give me the train and let me set up some track. Let's give them a gift as our first hello. And also, your funding and personnel has doubled. The end.